Hey there, and welcome to BingeBot, where we recap all the latest and greatest TV shows to help keep you in the loop. Today, it's time for Season 2 of The Rings of Power, that spin-off series based on The Lord of the Rings, which explores the rich history of Middle-earth and the battle for power that shaped it. As always, if you guys want to support our channel, you can do so via YouTube memberships, Patreon, or Buy Me a Coffee, and get some cool extra bonuses at the same time. Alright, let's see what's brewing with the second season of The Rings of Power, starting with Episode 1, Elven Kings Under the Sky. Centuries ago, following the defeat of the first Dark Lord Morgoth at the hands of the divine beings known as the Valar, the Second Age began, marking an era where the orcs were left without a leader. Seeing this opportunity, Sauron, Morgoth's lieutenant and most trusted sorcerer, takes human form and demands that the orcs accept him as their new Dark Lord. Despite being reluctant, the orcs decide to crown Sauron with Morgoth's Iron Crown. However, just as Eddar, an elf who was corrupted by Morgoth's power ages ago, is about to place the crown upon Sauron's head, he suddenly flips it upside down and stabs Sauron in the back, sparking the rest of the orcs to attack Sauron as well. After countless stabs, Sauron finally lies still, when suddenly he lets out a piercing scream as blinding light bursts from his body, causing it to disintegrate into mist that rains down upon the orcs, who hail Eddar as their new ruler.
Hail, Arda! My children, you are free!
Unbeknownst to all of them, Sauron's dark blood has leaked deep underground, where it begins feeding on any creatures that it can find, like rats and centipedes. After surviving this way for centuries, Sauron eventually gains enough energy to emerge from underground and feed on humans, allowing him to take the form of a man whom he names Halbrand, intending to exact revenge on Eddar and ultimately enslave all of Middle-earth as the new Dark Lord. In the present day, after the legendary smith Celebrimbor forged the 3 elven rings in the city of Eregion, Elrond takes the rings and races back to Lindon, the capital of the High Elves, with Galadriel chasing after him, wanting to retrieve the rings. Upon reaching Lindon, Elrond and Galadriel stand before the High King, Gil-galad, where Elrond voices his concern that the rings may harbor evil powers, as they were made under the influence of Halbrand, a man who lied about his identity. When Gil-galad asks Galadriel who Halbrand really is, she admits that she discovered he was Sauron, but insists that the rings aren't tainted by his evil, as he never got a chance to touch them. Understanding this and knowing that the rings are the only hope for the elves to survive, Gil-galad orders Elrond to hand them over, but Elrond refuses and decides to escape by leaping into a waterfall. Having been shunned by Galadriel, Halbrand travels to Mordor, the dark land that Eddar and his orcs have made their home. Seemingly having a convoluted plan in mind, Halbrand informs Eddar that Sauron's returned in a new human form, and is now hiding in Eregion, claiming that the elves have formed an alliance with him to help them defeat Eddar. With this knowledge, Eddar forces Halbrand to demonstrate his loyalty by bowing low, pressing his head to Eddar's foot. Once that's done, Eddar sends Halbrand to Eregion to seek out Sauron, so when Eddar launches his attack on the city, he will be able to easily identify and destroy Sauron once and for all. Far to the east, the Astari wizard who fell from the sky, referred to as the Stranger, has been wandering aimlessly through the desert with the hobbit Nori, unable to find the star constellation that he's seeking. But luckily, they receive unexpected help when Poppy, Nori's friend, arrives, having decided to join them on their journey. And with Poppy's help, they manage to reach Rhuin, the land that the Stranger has been envisioning in his dreams. Having survived the fall, Elrond realizes that he must get rid of the rings, and for this reason, he approaches Master Círdan, the oldest and wisest elf, and gives him the pouch containing the 3 rings, requesting that he hide them where no one else will find them. After being informed by Elrond that the rings are gone, Gil-galad and the rest of the High Elves watch as the last few leaves of the Great Tree fall, indicating that their race's time in Middle-earth is ending. However, to everyone's surprise, Círdan arrives, informing Gil-galad that he couldn't throw the rings away, as upon seeing them, he recognized that they're the only objects in Middle-earth that embody true perfection. Already wearing one of the rings, Círdan hands Gil-galad the remaining 2, only for Elrond to interrupt by shouting no, startling Gil-galad and causing one of the rings to slip from his grasp and roll to Galadriel's feet. Without hesitation, Galadriel picks it up and places it on her finger as Gil-galad puts on the 3rd ring. The power of the rings is evident right away, as the Great Tree revives and radiates with light, allowing the elves to continue thriving in Middle-earth. Episode 2, Where the Stars Are Strange. While visiting the monument of her late brother Finrod in Lindon's Gardens, Galadriel experiences a prophetic vision of Celebrimbor informing her that Sauron's returned to Eregion. And in an instant, everything turns red as Celebrimbor is ensnared by vines and dragged towards a towering tree, where he's brutally impaled by several thorns. Understanding that this is a warning message from her ring, which is named Nenya, Galadriel insists to Gil-galad that she must travel to Eregion, along with Elrond, to protect it from Sauron. All the way in Rhûn, a group of masked mercenaries known as the Godrim try to ambush the stranger. In response to this aggression, the stranger picks up a staff off the ground and slams it down, unleashing a magical sandstorm that ends up being far too strong for him to control, especially as the staff crumbles to dust. Although the storm prevents the Godrim from capturing him, it sends Nori and Poppy flying away, separating them from the stranger. Upon reaching Eregion, Halbrand's denied entry by Celebrimbor, who's been warned by Galadriel not to let him in, though he doesn't know that this is because Halbrand is Sauron. To ease Celebrimbor's mind, Halbrand falsely claims that he and Galadriel have already reconciled after the Three Rings proved successful in preserving the elves. And overjoyed by this news, Celebrimbor welcomes Halbrand and invites him into his forge, where Halbrand reveals that he's come to ask Celebrimbor to create 9 rings for the humans.
Well, to plead with you to make rings for men.
Rings for men?
Immediately, Celebrimbor rejects this idea, knowing that the humans are easily corruptible and would become slaves to the ring's power. Anticipating this reaction, Halbrand informs Celebrimbor that he's not really human, and now that he trusts Celebrimbor, he will reveal his true form. However, this proves to be yet another lie, as instead of confessing that he's Sauron, Halbrand assumes yet another disguise, this time of Anatar, the Lord of Gifts, and asserts that he's a messenger sent by the Valar to work alongside Celebrimbor, so that together they can bless Middle-earth with many more rings.
Our work begins now.
What am I to call you?
Anatar.
Lord of Gifts.
Episode 3: The Eagle and the Scepter. Following Isildur's supposed death in the eruption of Mount Doom, his loyal horse Beric refuses to accept anyone else's command, and instead bolts through Mordor until he arrives at a cave where he discovers Isildur alive, but trapped in a web spun by giant spiders. The sight of Beric fills Isildur with hope, prompting him to reach for a dagger from a nearby Orcus' body, which he uses to cut through the spider silk before mounting Beric and escaping the cave. After riding around for some time, Isildur stumbles upon a wrecked caravan where he encounters a girl around his age named Estrid. And once Estrid presents him with a map, Isildur realizes that there's a nearby human settlement called Pelargir, a place they both agree to head to, especially as Estrid hopes to find her missing fiancé there. When they arrive in Pelargir, however, they find all of its inhabitants in mourning, with the elven soldier Arondir holding a pyre for Bronwyn, the woman that he loved, as the arrow that had struck her in the previous battle against Eddar was poisoned and ultimately killed her. Now that Celebrimbor is eager to work with Anatar, their first course of action is to send an invitation to the ruler of the dwarves in Khazad-dum, King Durin III, informing him that they're willing to create 7 rings for the Dwarven lords if he provides the required rare metal, Mithril, from his mines. Although cautious as usual, King Durin agrees and brings Mithril to Eregion. With gratitude, Celebrimbor accepts the Mithril, ready to add it to the molten metal to craft the Dwarven rings, just as he did before with the Elven rings. But this time, there's one major difference. As with the Dwarven rings, Sauron's the one who tosses the Mithril into the molten mixture with his own hands, while for the Elven rings, it was Celebrimbor. Episode 4: Eldest. As Elrond, Galadriel, and a group of elven soldiers make their way through the forest at night, they're suddenly attacked by a flurry of arrows from Eddar's orcs, who are also advancing towards Eregion. When one of the elves gets struck by an arrow, Galadriel touches his injury, and instantly Nenya begins to glimmer, rapidly healing the wound. Witnessing this, Elrond struck with awe, and finally begins to believe that the 3 elven rings are a force of inherent good. Realizing that the orcs are closing in, Galadriel removes the ring and hands it to Elrond, urging him to hurry back to Lindon to warn Gil-galad that Eddar is preparing an attack on Eregion, while she stays behind to divert the orcs' attention. Once Elrond and the other elves depart, Galadriel confronts the orcs, eliminating several of them with well-aimed throwing knives and blazing arrows, while skillfully dodging their blades. Yet, while attempting to flee on horseback, a chain is suddenly thrown around her, yanking her down to the ground and causing Galadriel to find herself at the mercy of Eddar. Episode 5: Halls of Stone. After putting on one of the 7 rings, King Durin becomes consumed by an insatiable greed, an attitude entirely unlike him. The first sign of this greed is that he refuses to let any of the remaining 6 rings be worn by the other Dwarven lords, seemingly wanting to keep all of the power for himself. Furthermore, King Durin becomes obsessed with digging deeper into the mines of the Dwarven underground city to extract all of the gold within it, despite the obvious danger of such a deep excavation. Disturbed by this change in his father, Durin IV heads to Eregion to speak with Celebrimbor, expressing concern that something's wrong with the 7 rings as they seem to be corrupting their bearer rather than providing healing and protection, the complete opposite of the Elven rings. Surprised, Celebrimbor responds that he crafted the Dwarven rings precisely as he did the Elven ones, which leads Durin to argue that perhaps the problem lies in those involved in making the rings, suggesting that Anatar may not be who he claims to be.
Then maybe the fault's in the ring maker.
What do you mean?
How much do you really know about this Anatar?
Episode 6. Where is he? Now that she's his prisoner, Galadriel's forced into conversation with Eddar, who unexpectedly suggests the elves should consider becoming allies with the orcs as they share the common goal of destroying Sauron. Although Galadriel's not sure about an alliance, she acknowledges that Eddar could indeed be useful in taking down Sauron, leading her to reveal to him that Halbrand is in fact Sauron, something that Eddar already suspected.
Yes, Halbrand is Sauron. He's in Eregion to craft rings that will allow him to dominate my kind.
With this confirmation, Eddar orders all of his orcs to attack Eregion to find and kill Sauron, a decision that Galadriel staunchly opposes, knowing that the orcs will devastate Eregion and all the elves living in it, which she now recognized must have been part of Sauron's convoluted plan all along. Nevertheless, Eddar is resolute, sending his orcs marching on Eregion and ordering the catapults to rain down fireballs upon the city, igniting its destruction. Episode 7. Doomed to Die. With Durin's words echoing in his mind, Celebrimbor concludes that Anatar must be lying, because if he were truly the Lord of Gifts sent from Valar to enrich Middle-earth, then its inhabitants would have received all sorts of blessings by now. But instead, since Anatar's arrival, the king of the dwarves has all but lost his mind, and Eregion, a city that had enjoyed peace and prosperity for ages, has fallen into turmoil. Coming to terms with this realization, Celebrimbor understands that only one being possesses the ability to take on different forms like this, ultimately deducing that Anatar must be none other than Sauron.
True creation requires sacrifice. You are he. I have many names.
With his identity exposed, Sauron retorts that he can protect Eregion from further destruction, but only if Celebrimbor forges him the 9 rings for the humans. However, this time, Celebrimbor won't even be using any mithril, as he's been deceived into thinking he was adding mithril to his molten metal, when in fact, he was adding Sauron's dark blood. Fortunately, as Celebrimbor crafts the rings, Eregion receives reinforcements as an elven army arrives from Lindon, led by Gil-galad himself and Elrond. Wanting to escape Addar's camp, Galadriel dons a hood and covers her face and tries to sneak through the orcs, but eventually, one of them notices her golden hair. Luckily, several arrows come out of nowhere, killing all the orcs surrounding Galadriel and allowing her to escape. A moment later, she discovers that the arrows are fired by Arondir, who's arrived to help his fellow elves. During a brief period when Sauron isn't watching him, Celebrimbor completes forging the 9 rings and quickly realizes that he simply cannot allow them to fall into Sauron's hands. Stepping out into the ravaged city, he's in disbelief to find that Galadriel's arrived. Willing to sacrifice himself, Celebrimbor gives Galadriel the 9 rings in a pouch and asks her to flee, while he stays behind to buy her some time. Understanding what's at stake, Galadriel departs, all while the battle outside the wall rages on, causing heavy casualties on both sides, with the orcs eventually gaining the upper hand, breaching the walls and invading Eregion. While Elrond's devastated by this defeat, things get even worse with the arrival of Eddar, who instead of killing Elrond, only snatches Nenya from him. Episode 8. Shadow and Flame. In Khazad-dum, despite Durin IV's pleas to stop, King Durin persists in digging deeper into the mountain until he uncovers a vast chamber brimming with mithril. But within this chamber also lies a gigantic evil spirit known as a Balrog. Enraged by King Durin's disturbance, the fiery spirit unleashes its fury, destroying the chamber and clawing its way out. Confronted with the terrifying spirit, King Durin finally snaps back to his senses and takes off the ring, and then picks up his axe. Turning to Durin IV one last time, he asks for forgiveness before declaring him the new king. And with a final battle cry, he launches himself at the Balrog, attempting to strike it down with his axe, but the Balrog retaliates, swinging its flaming sword. Once their weapons collide, a massive explosion ensues, causing the entrance to collapse and sealing the chamber once again. Later, while he's still in mourning, Durin IV faces a new problem, as rumors have spread across Khazad-dum that he wasn't actually his father's preferred heir, leading the other Dwarven lords, including Durin's own brother, to contest for the throne. Having been roaming the desert looking for Nori and Poppy, the stranger discovers that they've joined another Hobbit tribe, known as the Stoors, who reside in a small village. But just as the stranger approaches, he encounters a dark wizard, another Astari, who was sent to Middle-earth ages ago. Knowing that the stranger wants to master his powers, the Dark Wizard promises to help him if he agrees to join forces so they can defeat Sauron together. While this is a tempting offer, the stranger refuses, as he recognizes that the Dark Wizard doesn't want to defeat Sauron to protect Middle-earth, but because he wants to conquer it himself. Angered by this rejection, the Dark Wizard shows his cruelty by using magic to shatter the surrounding hills, raising the stones high into the air before sending them crashing to obliterate the Stoors' village. When the Dark Wizard departs, the surviving Stoors realize they must seek a new place to live, and after gathering their belongings from the rubble, they set off on a journey, bidding farewell to the stranger. And this is when a small, unexpected detail catches his attention. Having never seen anyone of his size before, the Stoors mistakenly believe that the stranger is an elf, and begin referring to him as Grand Elf. Hearing this, the stranger feels an inexplicable familiarity with the name, and he quickly realizes that he will forever be known as Gandalf. Recognizing that the Stoors are undertaking their first migration with no sense of where to go, Nori and Poppy decide to accompany them, but sadly, this means that Nori must part ways with Gandalf, telling him that they each have their own adventures to pursue now. While this farewell could have left Gandalf feeling lost, he instantly understands that everything's exactly as it should be when he stumbles upon a unique staff lying on the ground, which he feels a strong connection to, much like the name that he's just embraced. With the staff in hand, Gandalf makes his way across the desert towards the house of Tom Bombadil, a friendly, whimsical man that he'd met earlier while looking for Nori. Having seen the impressive magical control that Tom possesses over various elements of nature like wind, fire, and plant life, Gandalf senses that Tom may be crucial in helping him master his powers, a notion that's affirmed when Tom invites him to sit down and sing together in his house, which is located directly below the star constellation that Gandalf has been seeking all along. In Pelargir, Isildur has been trying to find a way to return home to Númenor, and he gets his chance when Kemen, the son of Pharazôn, a high-ranking official in Númenor, arrives with a ship to announce that Númenor will be establishing a fortress in Pelargir. While issuing his orders, Kemen's taken aback when he finds Isildur alive and agrees to help him return to Númenor on his ship. Having just shared an emotional kiss with Estrid, Isildur requests Kemen to allow her to join them, but Kemen refuses, explaining that commoners are not permitted on board. Wanting him to make an exception, Isildur reminds Kemen that his father, Elendil, is the sea captain to the Queen Regent Miriel. In response, Kemen discloses that his own father, Pharazôn, is now the king of Númenor, and that Miriel and her followers are considered traitors.
Father, post-captain to Queen Regent Miriel.
My father is now king, and yours is wanted for treason.
As a result of this revelation, Isildur is forced to board the ship by himself, leaving Estrid behind. Estrid won't be left completely alone though, as she's managed to find her fiancé, Hagen. Still, while she appreciates Hagen's kindness, she simply doesn't love him like she loves Isildur, which is why she's disheartened to see him leave. Tragically, it is true that after the death of Miriel's father, the former king of Númenor, both she and Elendil have been labeled traitors by Pharazôn, who spread rumors that they've sided with Sauron. Nevertheless, it's only Miriel who ends up being captured, as she's ordered Elendil to escape to the western parts of Númenor, where he's likely to earn the people's allegiance, especially when they see him wielding the renowned sword, Narsil, which she entrusted to him, which will allow Elendil to reclaim his lordship of the West. With Eregion fully under their control, the orcs, led by Glug, one of Eddar's closest servants, storm the Forge, where they discover that Sauron's tortured Celebrimbor by shooting him with several arrows, before ultimately impaling him with a spear through the stomach, killing him and pinning him against a pillar, a haunting sight reminiscent of Galadriel's vision. With the 9 rings in her possession, Galadriel seems willing to negotiate a truce with Eddar and decides to meet with him. To her surprise, she finds Eddar wearing Nenya, which has temporarily restored him to his original elven form, cleansing him of the dark corruption inflicted by Morgoth centuries ago. Having experienced the ring's power for good, Eddar takes it off and gently hands it back to Galadriel, requesting that she use it to help him vanquish Sauron. In return, he offers to take all of his orcs back to Mordor, where they might live without conflict, thus securing an everlasting peace for Middle-earth.
Help me vanquish Sauron with it. And I swear to you, I will recall my children to Mordor, never to make war on Middle-earth again.
Sadly, just a moment later, a seemingly injured Glug's carried over, reporting to Eddar that he's encountered Sauron, who mercilessly brutalized him. As Eddar leans in to console the fallen orc, he's met with the tragic reality that he's been betrayed, as Glug and the surrounding orcs suddenly begin stabbing Eddar relentlessly, having chosen Sauron as their new ruler due to their frustration that Eddar sacrificed so many of them to breach Eregion. Just then, Sauron arrives, picks up the Iron Crown, and watches with satisfaction as Eddar takes his final breath. Now that he's exacted revenge on Eddar, Sauron turns his attention to Galadriel, who quickly engages him in a sword fight, which doesn't end well for her, as Sauron corners her against a stone pillar and stabs her deeply in the chest with his crown, causing her to fall to the ground as he seizes the pouch containing the 9 rings. Realizing that she cannot afford to lose her ring as well, Galadriel musters all of her strength to rise, clutches Nenya, and steps off the cliff behind her. Right after, Glug approaches Sauron seeking his command, only for Sauron to coldly kill him for no reason, showing the orcs that they made a grave mistake in betraying Eddar, as Sauron won't show them a fraction of the respect that Eddar did. Having witnessed Galadriel's fall, Elrond, Arondir, and Gil-galad rush to her aid. Seeing that she's afflicted by the dark magic of the Iron Crown, Elrond understands that there's only one way to save her, and places Nenya on his own finger. When Galadriel awakens, she finds herself in a serene valley north of Eregion, where Elrond explains that this is a sanctuary protected by the Elven Rings, before removing Nenya and placing it back on Galadriel's hand. Quickly regaining her strength, Galadriel stands tall beside Gil-galad, who lifts his sword high before all of the gathered elves. Moved by this display of resilience, they all respond by raising their own weapons and letting out resounding roars, clearly declaring that they'll stand against Sauron and defend Middle-earth until the very end. And that's the end of the Rings of Power Season 2. What'd you guys think of the second season? I'm eager to hear everyone's thoughts in the comments. Thanks for checking out a recap and for watching it until the end. If you liked the video, maybe share it with a friend or drop us a like. And if you're interested in more great content like this, subscribe to our channel and don't forget to ring the notification bell. Thanks again for watching. We'll be back soon with another recap, but for now, BingeBot is logging off.